It's no secret that ChatGPT and AI models are taking the world by storm, and that includes the world of writing and publishing books. There have been so many conversations happening about the good and bad of using AI and potential use cases that ChatGPT might offer authors. While obviously this conversation is going to have to be ongoing as its capabilities expand and as we explore issues with AI going forward, today I want to talk about 3 use cases I've found that are really helpful for authors who are working on a book. What I do like about ChatGPT is its ability to streamline processes and free up your time for what actually matters, which I think is the writing component. So, spoiler alert, one of these use cases is not having ChatGPT write your entire book, which I do not recommend. So I'm going to go through these 3 use cases I've found and do a live demo where we can explore what the output is. If you are at all interested in the intersection of AI and publishing, check out my other 2 videos. I did a 2-part series on if AI is the end of creative writing and then how the publishing industry is reacting to AI, so definitely check those out. And if you are a writer looking to strengthen your abilities or maybe dive into the publishing aspect of things, definitely subscribe to my channel. Every week, I either offer tactical tips like this one for how to improve your writing ability, or I talk about the publishing industry and how to break into it. I also have a free resource for anyone with a current work in progress. It is called my Story Self-Assessment Worksheet, and it is a fun, simple quiz designed to help you look at your manuscript and your story from a different level and identify some areas you can improve on the next draft. Downloading that is going to sign you up for my newsletter where I publish exclusive interviews with publishing insiders and successfully published authors, and they are giving some really amazing tips and insights, so you don't want to miss out on that. So let's dive into the first use case for AI for authors, which is using it for title brainstorming. I know how challenging titles can be to come up with. You mess around with different titles. You want it to strike that perfect evocative tone that reflects the genre as well. Believe me, even when I was in the publishing industry, titles changed so many times because it is so hard to get it right. And this is a place where I think brainstorming with ChatGPT could be kind of fun and interesting. I will say that when you are at the manuscript phase, coming up with a title is ultimately not that important. So you can feel fine keeping the manuscript as untitled for as long as you want. But I know many of you want a title, whether that is just to give your project more focus or make it feel more real, or you're ready to query and you want to query with a working title. So rather than spending hours and hours toiling over titles yourself, maybe you could try prompting ChatGPT and see what happens. So let's actually go ahead and do that right now. What I think I want to do here is give the AI model a little bit of information about my plot and my story, and then have it come up with some example titles. Maybe I'll tell it to come up with 10. So let's see what happens. Come up with a title for a contemporary thriller set in Iceland that follows 2 college students on a road trip during their summer break when one of them suddenly goes missing. Please provide 10 title ideas. All right, let's see. All right, so we have Frozen Secrets, Vanished in Iceland, The Disappearance at this particular location that I do not know how to pronounce, Icelandic Nightmare, The Lost Road, Summer Solstice Suspense, In Search of Aurora, Cold Traces, Midnight Sun Mystery, and Dark Icelandic Roads. So this is interesting, right? Some of them just make no sense whatsoever, like Cold Traces doesn't really mean much to me. It kind of just feels like 2 words thrown together. And Summer Solstice Suspense, I get they're going for the alliteration, but that just sounds so cheesy. And I don't want suspense in the title of my suspense novel, right? But I do kind of like In Search of Aurora because I said there was a character missing, and if that character was named Aurora, and this also reflects the Aurora Borealis, So that one could be cool to play around with a little bit. Even if none of these titles ultimately be one that you want to move forward with, maybe it can at least get the gears turning on aspects you want to reflect in the title or words that you want to use. I will say that with ChatGPT, you want to make sure that it's not giving you titles that already exist and are already being used for a book. So before going forward with any title, I would definitely do a Google search. Let's go into the second use case for ChatGPT for authors, which is coming up with comparable titles. I hope some of you just breathed a huge sigh of relief because I know how challenging comparable titles can be to come up with. To me, this is one of the most exciting functions of ChatGPT in its current form, because as an author, or me as an editor, we can't read every single book that has ever been published in the past few years, but ChatGPT has been trained on a huge amount of data, and it might know a lot more about recently published books than we do and can help sift through them for us. There's really no easy way to Google comparable titles as it is, so this kind of fills that void. So for this one, I do want to give it very specific parameters for coming up with the comparable titles, because it is a bit of a dance in that you want to find something that's recently published, something that's published by a traditional publishing house, and something that sold well but isn't necessarily a mega bestseller, right? So let's use this same random plot idea that I came up with and ask it to come up with some comps. Provide a list of 10 thrillers that involve one or more of the following aspects: Iceland, college students, someone disappearing, road trip. And then maybe I'll say first person, I'll say dual first person POVs, because maybe that's the structure of this novel. The thrillers should have been published in the past 5 years, which is about standard for comps, and should have sold well, but were not huge bestsellers. They should all have been published by traditional publishing houses. I'll say excluding self-published books. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this is interesting because it kind of misunderstood me, right? It said, unfortunately, I cannot provide a list of thrillers that meet all the specific criteria you've outlined, which I said involve one or more of the following aspects, so don't know why it was confused there. It says, while there are certainly thrillers that involve Iceland, college students, someone disappearing, road trips, and dual first-person POVs, it is unlikely that all of these elements would be present in a single book. Additionally, it is difficult to verify which books have sold well without access to specific sales data. That is fair. I actually like that it raised this point that they can't find a comp that includes all of those aspects, because that's something I talk about a lot with writers who I am working on query materials with. They say, well, there's no comp for my book because there's nothing that combines all of these aspects of my plot, my characters, my setting, and a comp should not be a perfect match to your book. That's impossible, right? Because you've written something entirely unique. A comp ultimately should just include certain aspects of your book. That's why I really like the structure of saying your book is X meets Y. Maybe one comp involves the setting and another comp involves something about the characters or the tone. So spiel over, let's go through what it actually provided me. However, I can provide a list of 5 contemporary thrillers that involve some combination of these elements and have been well received by critics and readers. Okay, that's pretty good. And then here it gives me these titles. I noticed that they are all published no later than 2021, and that is because its data set is actually limited. So that is something very important to consider when and if you are using ChatGPT for comps. The data set it has stops at 2021. So as we go into future years, it is either going to need to be updated with more recent information, or you're going to end up using old comps. So I'm not going to go through all of these comps, but what I would do as a next step is Google each of these books, read an excerpt if you can on Amazon or another website, and read the description, of course. Maybe read the whole book, ideally, if you have time and you feel compelled to. That's always the best way to know if it's a good comp. And see if what it gave you is worthwhile, and maybe that could be a good comp. At least it gives you a starting point. My last word of caution here is that ChatGPT can spit out totally incorrect information. So you also want to make sure that these books actually exist. Do not just copy and paste this into your query letter without doing further research and looking into the books, okay? Just use it as a starting point. Let's talk about the final use case authors can have for ChatGPT, which is using it for background research. Almost every book involves some amount of research. Whether you have a character who's trying to open a bakery in Asheville and you don't really know what all of that process entails, or you are writing a historical novel about the Roman army and you don't know what those characters would have worn during a certain battle. You're likely going to find yourself Googling obsessively over certain details that you want to portray accurately in your book. So this is where ChatGPT can be a really helpful research tool. You can, of course, find this information via a Google search, but the nature of the AI model is that it gives you a very succinct answer and grabs information from multiple sources and compiles it into, a nice, clean answer for you versus you having to read 10 articles. So let's try it out for, again, this thriller set in Iceland. So maybe I want to research what a 10-day road trip would look like around the entire country of Iceland and what different stops the characters would make. So I could prompt ChatGPT with something like, please provide an itinerary for a 5-day road trip across the country of Iceland, stopping at all of the major tourist attractions. All of the stops should be accessible by car because it's a road trip, right? And should be open to visitors in the winter months, because maybe my novel is set in winter. Okay, let's see. So here you can see it gave me a full itinerary. It's telling me all these different attractions to visit and giving me the overview of which cities we are traveling to on each day, all the way back to Reykjavik. So that's pretty interesting. If I needed to structure my novel, maybe I have it structured to be day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, as the thriller is unraveling. And I can use this potentially as an outline. And I could potentially dive into some of these different sites and attractions that it is suggesting and see if I want my characters to go there. I might go a step further and ask it some more details about how long each of these drives would take, because I'm gonna have to convey that in the novel, right? So I could say, based on the itinerary above, specify how many hours of driving will be required each day between each location. All right, let's see. Okay. It's giving me some estimated driving time, obviously a range, and telling me that it would obviously vary based on different conditions. So that gives me something. And of course I could look up those different locations on Google Maps, or maybe I will do that to fact check that information that it fed me. But you can see how there are different options for prompting it and receiving information that you can maybe incorporate in your novel without having to do hours and hours and hours of background research. As with all the other use cases, don't take anything it says at face value. You will always want to do your actual research and homework, but it can get the wheels turning. So I hope this video gave you some inspiration for how ChatGPT can help empower you as an author and free up your time for the stuff that you actually want to be doing. And maybe it can even help you get unstuck if you feel like you can't come up with a title or can't come up with a comp or can't come up with this certain background element. Let me know in the comments if you've experimented with ChatGPT. Let me know if you use it for any of these use cases or if there are other use cases that you've used it for in your writing process. I can definitely do a follow-up video with additional use cases, so let me know how you guys are all using it. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in hearing more of my perspective on AI and ChatGPT intersecting with writing and publishing, check out my other 2 videos in the series. I'll link them in the description. If you found this video interesting, please hit that thumbs up button and go ahead and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Don't forget your free story self-assessment worksheet waiting for you in the description below. Thanks so much for watching and happy writing.